Welcome everyone. And by the way, I want to apologize if there's a lag in video and audio. We're still figuring it out and working with our team behind the scenes to make sure that we're as good as we can be. So before we get started, I want to introduce everyone appropriately. So we'll start off to my bottom, which is Yael Lerman. Yael, you are the director of Stand With Us Side Off Legal Department, which combats anti-Semitic and anti-Israel activity using legal tools. I think you coordinate a team of staff, you coordinate with different attorneys, pro bono attorneys. I think you have over 200. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's probably gone up since then. And we're very grateful to have you with us and to have you as a resource for Alums for Campus Fairness. And then we have Susan Price with us. We are thrilled to have you, Susan. You've been with us really since the beginning, and I know that you graduated Cornell, you're a Cornell alumna, and you just recently moved to Nashville. So I guess, are you reaching out to us from the South? Are you in Nashville right now?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, welcome. We're thrilled to have you, and I know that you've been working really closely with our Tufts chapter as our Tufts chapter leader, as your son Max, who's a recent graduate from Tufts. And we're really thrilled that you're here to join us. And then finally, we have Scott Shea, and many of you might recognize Scott, who was just with us on a webinar last week, maybe 2 weeks ago. Everything, the timing always gets to me. But Scott, you're a leading businessman, a thought leader, author of several widely read books on profound issues within the Jewish community. You're the co-founder and chairman of Signature Bank, and most importantly, you are an alumnus of Northwestern University. Scott's most recent book, Conspiracy U, is what we talked about in our webinar. And if you're not up to date, I strongly encourage you all to check out our recording on YouTube so you can hear about our robust conversation with Scott from the last couple of weeks. So thank you all for being with us and for joining us on stage. We're excited about this kind of conversation. The title of our panel is Growing Anti-Semitism on College Campuses. And I kind of would like to start off with all of your thoughts. You all kind of play different aspects. Susan as a mother of current students and also as an alumna, Yael from a legal perspective, Scott from really the research and faculty perspective. I'd love to understand what you're seeing on campuses today. Like Yael, I know that you wanted to discuss about some legal strategies that can be helpful. Maybe we can start off with you, and then we can go around the horn then.
Fantastic. Well, first of all, thank you, Avi and Joel, for having me here today. Your remarkable work bringing alums' voices to bear makes such a difference on campus. So at the Stand With Us Side Off Legal Department, we find that every situation on campus demands a different legal response. And until there is a legal response and community pressure, like from ACF, administrations generally ignore anti-Jewish hatred, or they do take it less seriously than hatred directed against other minority groups. So we work nonstop with different legal angles for every situation. That means we may file Title VI actions with the Department of Education, write legal letters to university administrations, create national campaigns, analyze school policies to defeat BDS resolutions, provide free legal workshops, threaten legal action where necessary, and provide free legal counsel. Most importantly, we let students know they are never alone and that a legal response almost never requires litigation. That's something very important to students. Most of them don't want to be involved in litigation. So they need to know that almost never happens. There's so many other ways we can provide a legal response, and that they shouldn't try to figure out complex legal issues on their own. To break it down a little more and be a little more specific, I'd say in this past year, we're finding that nearly all student inquiries for legal help come down to free speech, harassment, and academic freedom issues, and then how the university policies and federal laws come into play with that. So an example would be just 2 months ago, a student reached out to us from a public university. For the entire first semester, she faced anti-Semitic harassment and bullying in her dorm. It was on social media, it was in person, and it was over a span of months. It was horrendous. We're talking about students giving Nazi salutes, vandalism, nearly constant verbal attacks by nearly a dozen kids in her dorm. The student had done an amazing job of keeping the evidence and filing a report on her own with the Campus Department of Discrimination. But the administration buried her case. Finally, she reached out to her Hillel director, who connected her with the sign-off legal department. We met with the student. Together, we wrote a legal letter to the university citing all the university policies and federal laws that had been violated, and we demanded a response. We showed the university that this student had the full legal support of a national organization behind her and that we were taking it very seriously. Within a day of sending our letter, the administration reached out to meet with us and the student. And at that meeting, the university informed us that they were disciplining the perpetrators to the fullest extent possible, more than they had ever done so in any case previously. But it took the extra push from the Stand With Us Side Up legal department to get the university to respond to the student. And that is what we're here for. We help both those students who do not feel empowered and those students who are courageous enough to take action.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a great example of where you play such a vital role. Your team plays such a vital role, and it's really interesting. Maybe Susan, I'd love to hear your perspective as a parent, as an alumna. What are you seeing on campuses today? What trends are you seeing?
I'm seeing a kind of a new thing with BDS campaigns. I mean, at University of Chicago, there have recently been the calls to boycott Zionist classes and professors. At NYU, there have been some calls to boycott Zionist clubs. And Tufts, just a few weeks ago, Shea announced a new BDS campaign, but it's not the usual, go through student referenda or student government and let's have a vote. Instead, they're taking it right to the students. It calls for students to show support for Palestine liberation through their own personal choices, not just refusing to buy products, but participate in any group that enables and normalizes Zionist settler colonialism. So until Palestine is free, they should boycott anything that benefits or normalizes Israel, which they're also encouraging the boycott of student groups, and they name them specifically, including Tufts Friends of Israel, Hillel's Vision of Peace program, because they said the words peace and dialogue are used to cover up Israeli violence. They call out Birthright, and even J Street for calling for a two-state solution, as well as encouraging boycott of academic programs and study abroad, as well as products. So it's basically a boycott against their fellow students and their expression of Jewish campus life. And one of the things I found most shocking in their very long statement that they put together, several pages, but I found this line: SJP supports the full range of Palestinian resistance against settler colonialism. And ADL New England said about this, creating lists of names of students, because part of this is also, they encourage students to sign a pledge that they're going to behave this way. So ADL said, creating lists of names of students who either support or through omission don't support the anti-Israel SJP agenda divides the campus and effectively shuns Jewish students who will be forced to either hide their personal views or risk being ostracized and excluded from campus life. And then a few other trends. We always talk about intersectionality, how people are divided into different groups and then they align with one another. Well, at Tufts, there's something called the Group of Six. These affinity groups are classified by Tufts Division of Student Diversity and Inclusion, and they are Africana, Asian American, First, which are first in the family to go to college, Latino, LGBT, and women. But when asked about having a Jewish student or Hillel group, it's excluded. And then SJP and their work, like they did with their Deadly Exchange campaign, they get either these other affinity groups or progressive groups to work together to support their causes. And just briefly, Deadly Exchange, which we saw at Tufts, is their theory that U.S. police learn racial profiling and violent behavior in ADL exchange trips to Israel. And then last spring, we saw the academic statements that come from, whether through a field of study or from different university departments. Sometimes there's just a pro-BDS academic statement, but last May, These were statements signed by professors against Israel defending herself from Hamas. And, the professors sign these with their names, titles, departments, universities. And that makes their students and other faculty even feel intimidated. It makes it look like the university is endorsing this statement. And it's really their own personal opinions appear to represent, what the university is saying. And then recently, MESA, the Middle East Studies Association, had their BDS resolution, which passed overwhelmingly. And this would interfere with academic opportunities of students and faculty who want to study in or about Israel and the relationships a university may have with institutions in Israel, et cetera. And there were, 5, 7 universities so far that have resigned, including BC and Brandeis, have left that association after the recent vote.
Wow, a lot to unpack there. You shared a lot of really, really interesting information, and I actually think kind of weaves really well, Scott, into kind of your findings within your book. And I'd love if you can give us a little bit of what trends you're seeing on campus in the research that you did for your book. Maybe give us a little brief 30,000-foot view on the book for those who weren't on our webinar, and to understand kind of what you've seen and maybe some correlations you're seeing based on even what Susan just talked about.
Well, thank you, Avi, and kol hakavod to Yael and Susan and to Alums for College Fairness. So my book basically explains how conspiracy theories about Jews are masquerading as scholarship on campus, both on the far left, which we're more familiar with, and surprisingly on the far right as well, although a little more surreptitiously, a lot more surreptitiously. And one of the things that's sort of amazing, I found amazing in the research, is that essentially the far right and the far left are saying exactly the same thing about Jews. So Susan just gave the example of how colleges, college groups, college student associations are being asked to boycott Jews and only work with those Jews who agree with them. So, for example, Jewish Voice for Peace is okay because those are Jews who say what the far left would like them to say, would like the Jews to say. Kevin McDonald, a leader of the far right and one of the leading neo-Nazi organizations, and who was a professor of psychology at California State, a tenured professor of psychology, says, I'm going to approximately quote him, he says, will the Jews, can we make a common cause with the Jews? Yes, only if they do what we expect them to do. If not, the world won't be too nice to them. That could have come straight from any of the left-wing organizations. If the Jews do what they're told, okay. Now, I mentioned, and I'll just say this in brief in our webinar a couple of weeks ago, that I think it's so important that alums get involved, because this is not something students can solve. Faculty are there permanently. I mean, we mentioned University of Chicago and also just before and also state anti-Semitism resolutions. So there's a full professor at Rutgers, who wrote a book. She is now a visiting professor at the University of Chicago's Posen Center. Of course, all these centers endowed by Jews, who wrote a book that says that Jews are harvesting organs, Israelis, Zionists, are harvesting organs from Palestinians and using them for transplantation to Jews and to other white supremacists. And in her view, obviously, the Jews are using technology to these words are so complicated and so meaningless, it's hard to remember, but essentially to use wireless technology to hack the DNA of Palestinians to systemically starve them. Those are only a few of the things she says. This is a book that passed peer review, that was published by Duke University Press, and won Best Book Award from the Women's Studies Association. So you have faculty who are teaching And by the way, essentially Alums for College Fairness has its roots at Vassar, and Ed Vassar essentially admitted that she was making it up. This turning the speculative into the now is the academic language used for the fact that she was making it up and lying. So this is endemic. But here's the thing, and this is what I was saying at the webinar last week, is that we have to recognize that universities and faculty do not care about the Jews. They really don't. And we just have to get over that. It's not about fairness to Jews. They couldn't care less. And it's like what happened in, the story of Purim, which is 2 weeks ago, which you read 2 weeks ago, which is when Mordecai first asked Esther to go and talk to King Ahasuerus to say, hey, the Jews are going to be slaughtered. Please tell the king. Well, the king, that's when she said, people can't go and talk to the king. And the king was sleeping like a baby in the story when the Jews were going to be massacred. That wasn't a problem. The only time the king couldn't sleep at night was when he was worried about his own head and worried about what was going to happen to himself. Then he woke up in the middle of the night, had to think things through. And I think what we need to do urgently, and I think only alums are capable of doing this and trustees, because students are not, is we need to find the folks who are still liberals on campus. And I mean that in the broad sense, in that they're willing to listen to other people. I'm talking about classic liberals who are willing to talk, who are worried about what's happening on the illiberal left and, of course, on the illiberal right, and who can make common cause, because fundamentally what's going on, and this is what I show in the book, and this is where I think we can make common cause, and I think it's the necessary hook, is we need to show and demonstrate that the corruption of academic standards is not just about the Jews, and it threatens to sink academia. And sadly, what happens on campus doesn't stay on campus. It'll sink society.
Very interesting. I appreciate you sharing the importance of alums for campus fairness and the importance of alumni to kind of come together. And to that end, I'd love to hear all of your thoughts on what alumni should do when they see, hear, read about anti-Semitic acts. How can they help? What should they be doing? What do you think are kind of like best practices or best steps they could be taking? I don't know if anyone wants to volunteer to go first, or else I'll pick on one of you. Maybe Susan, do you have any thoughts?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. People should reach out to their networks of alumni friends and parents of current and recent students and share these incidents on social media. Like ACF says, often students are alumni after just a few years. So most of their life is as alumni. You need to keep alumni and parents informed. Most people have no idea what is going on at college campuses, even at their own, but certainly not what these trends are across the country. And write to the administration, get in touch with Hillel or Chabad to make sure they know about incidents going on, but write to the administration and make sure they follow up after incidents occur, and that they act preventatively, encourage them to do so. And then be in touch with, ACF or Stand With Us, AMCA, Camera on Campus, Jewish on Campus, et cetera, all the places where you can report these incidents. And then, when the university asks for money, either tell them why you aren't giving or give to specific clubs or funds on campus. My dad is an alum of UNC Chapel Hill, and every time they call, because he gave for years, but over the last 5 years or so, he has not been giving, and every time he explains why. Every time there's an incident or they haven't responded sufficiently, he explains why.
Very interesting. Yeah, Scott.
I
have something to say too. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, so I agree with everything Susan said. I think that's absolutely right. And if you want to know what Stand With Us or ACF are doing in terms of a campaign, being part of a campaign at a specific university, please reach out when you hear about something. I think the efforts of alumni are among the most important and effective in combating anti-Semitism on campus, because a concerted campaign by alums gets the administration's attention. I'd like to focus on one particular way I think alums can make a tremendous difference. In the last year, Stand With Us has become a national leader in helping advise alums and donors on how to avoid the awful problem of when their major gifts to universities inadvertently fund and anti-Israel activity. So our work recently hit the news on this. I'd like to just focus on that one case. In 2016, Mrs. Becky Benaroya, who is an extraordinary leader in the Seattle Jewish community, gave $5 million to establish the University of Washington's Israel Studies program. She included in the contract a written intent that this endowment's purpose was to bring a positive perspective to campus. Otherwise, it was really a campus where there were no positive voices about Israel being expressed. Instead, over the next 5 years, the endowed professor used her position and the family name, because it was endowed in the family name, to stage anti-Israel activism. And it came to a head this past May with the Gaza crisis. Mrs. Benaroya contacted Stand With Us. She was horrified that a professor was using her endowment to demonize Israel on campus and educate students about settler colonialism. We helped Mrs. Benaroya engage with the university to address these concerns. And after several months, the parties were not able to reach an agreement. Mrs. Benaroya then decided to revoke her gift rather than continue funding anti-Israel activism on campus. And the university decided to return in full her $5 million investment. As a result of this story hitting the news, we are now receiving requests from donors and alums around the country to learn more about this issue. And fortunately, we've been engaged in this issue for over a year. There's 2 law firms in New York and in LA that are pro bono providing us with help. What really makes the difference here is clear contractual language, because endowments are just contracts. So you want very, very clear language that we can help with for free. We are happy to help with providing and drafting and editing. How to get in there, what your intent is in terms of supporting Israel and Jews on campus. And in this way, alums can make a tremendous difference in strategically deciding how to give to universities and making sure your gifts have clear contractual language. You can do more to protect Jewish students, combat anti-Semitism, and support Israel than nearly anyone.
Thanks, Al. Actually, I know that you've written a couple articles as well about this, and it's an incredibly important subject and something that we are going to be, I know in the future, we're already in the talks of like working together on what we can be doing to ensure that anyone who wants to, has given, or wants to give a gift to their alma mater, that they're doing it in a safe way, that that this kind of situation doesn't happen again. So I think that it's an incredibly important opportunity here, and it's important for all of alumni to be educated on what they can be doing, what other tools they can put in their toolbox to ensure that Israel's voice is being heard and that anti-Semitism is not being used in their name.
And Scott, I just want to add, it's sure. Not just the $5 million gifts. It can also be the $5,000 gifts and 100%. The $18 gifts. Any amount of money makes a difference and sends a message to the university of how you want your money to be spent.
100%. Thanks for saying that, Scott. I know that you had some thoughts as well. Please.
So a couple of things. First of all, everybody here is an alum of a university, and I'm going to take I wouldn't say contrarian, but I think a little bit more of a, and what I've tried to do is take a little bit more of a, I don't know if the word's aggressive, but proactive stance in this sense as an alum. I would say join your alumni association. So there was a BDS resolution a few years ago at Northwestern. And in concurrence with that, Northwestern was having an event here in New York at Gotham Hall. It's on Broadway. And I was invited and I went and I passed out flyers right at the entrance, and frankly, security came to me and I said, by the way, here's my registration for the event. And by the way, it's a First Amendment right. I'm just handing out flyers to my fellow alum. Now, that's not necessarily super comfortable, but I think we're going to have to get out of our comfort zone. I wasn't able to actually recruit anybody in that one. Maybe I was a little bit of a mashugana, but I did it. And I think that we have to get a little bit out of our comfort zone. So going to an alumni event when something is happening on your campus is actually precisely dafka what you should be doing, I think. And so I think giving some amount to remain in that in that information loop actually has some value. I know I've said things to people on various alumni councils, and interestingly enough, and I said it in my book, the most sympathetic trustees at Northwestern that I've spoken to were, everyone sit down, although no one will be shocked, were the non-Jews. The Jews on the board of trustees of Northwestern at the time were, they said, well, I'm going to, as I said, one of them said they're going to stop giving to endowed professorships and just give to buildings because a building can't become anti-Semitic or anti-Israel. The other thing I think we have to recognize, and I think Rebecca Ben-Arroyo is a role model to us. She's 98 years old. She is a fantastic woman, and she got off of her duff, which many alumni and contributors don't do. And call it kavod to Yael and to everybody who helped her. But to me, she is a role model. But let's look at what Lior Halperin, the woman who in question, was doing with the Jewish Studies Department at University of Washington. It should have been renamed the Palestinian Studies Department, because that's what was going on. And so we need to call out essentially where, women's studies, African American studies, any kind of indigenous studies departments essentially celebrate and really are very positive voices about the identities of the folks that they study. Uniquely in the Jewish studies departments, and like 600 people from Jewish studies departments actually wrote a letter to the University of Washington denouncing the reversion of the gift. We have to call out the fundamental corruption of what's happened to Jewish studies. I mean, again and again, we have to show this is not just about the Jews. We have to show that it's about these departments, some of these departments teaching a narrative that is not scholarship, it's advocacy.
Interesting. I know you want to say something. Go for it.
I just want to say, I think Scott's absolutely right. And I would just add that we should also give credit where credit is due, so that while there are some Israel studies departments that are, you're absolutely right, they're Israel-Palestine studies, they're not Israel studies. There are some departments that are fantastic and doing wonderful work, and we should be supporting. In fact, we should be directing funds to those departments. And one of the things we're working at Stand With Us is to compile a list for people who want to know, or what are the departments, where are the professors that really are supporting Jewish students on campus and Israel studies on campus. So be on the lookout for that.
Definitely, that's great to hear. And I just want to add that we'll be hearing later after this, we'll be going into breakout sessions that my associate director Joel will be talking about. But the Academic Engagement Network, who works directly with many faculty, they'll be represented and be speaking about it a little bit. So just wanted to flag that as well, to talk about faculty. I'd love to understand. I have actually like two questions. Maybe I'm not sure if they're intertwined, but perhaps. First of all, when we talk about donations, maybe Yael, this is more based towards you, or I'd love to hear from any of you if you have an opinion. Does this kind of like go into the Jews controlling the money kind of thing that we're controlling? Where like how do we respond to that when someone maybe questions our wishes when donating?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I encourage anyone to just Google Roz Rothstein Allgemeiner planned giving, or I don't know if I can submit the link. Roz actually answered this question directly in an op-ed that she published a few weeks ago. And the short answer is that just like professors do have academic freedom rights and free speech rights, donors have rights too. And they have the right to give or not to give, and universities have the right to not accept those gifts. Understanding what comes with them. And just like universities have, by the way, been accepting millions, if not billions of dollars from Qatar and United Arab Emirates and other countries to create Middle Eastern studies departments that are heavily skewed against Israel. Universities understand when they get certain gifts what the expectations are with those gifts. And so do professors, and donors should also understand that they have the right to clarify what they want their gift to look like.
Thank you. Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just add, I mean, I wrote an article which you could distribute as well. We referred to it on the webinar again a couple of weeks ago about Qatari gifts. They've given 23 billion that was disclosed, and then when the deadline came for penalties, they disclosed another 6 billion. So Qatar and UAE have given over $29 billion. So if you're talking about money, again, it shouldn't be about conspiracy theories. It should be about actual reported numbers. And they have gotten exactly what they paid for. But here's the thing. They're smart in this sense, in that, and this is, again, where I think going back to what Yale said, is support departments that are teaching the things you want taught. Qatar doesn't necessarily say, teach anti-Israelism. What they do is they find places that are teaching anti-Israelism and are teaching Jew hatred, and they support them heavily so they get a lot more of it. And that's the key. And they're smart. We should never underestimate our enemies. We should not make that mistake. And we do, unfortunately, too often. So Qatar has given $500 million to Northwestern University, reported it to the DOE. And what have they gotten? A lot more anti-Israelism. They've gotten a professor who thinks that Hassan Nasrallah should win a Nobel Prize. Is in the same camp as Nelson Mandela and Mahatma Gandhi. And they didn't have to tell the university to do that. They just supported more. It's like the Mae West thing, when something's, you can never have too much of a wonderful thing as far as they're concerned. And we need to recognize that.
Oh, that's pretty mind-blowing, honestly, those numbers. And that's enormous. I don't think you talked about, we talked about a little bit about trustees and other leaders. Do we think that that trustees and other leaders within the administrations are capable of, changing the environment for these Jewish and Zionist leaders? Are there any examples of maybe some ways that has happened, or that there's been some type of inroads being made? And if anyone wants to start off.
I would say absolutely. And I think Susan started to touch on it in her previous remarks. So if you just look at SJP, for example, their newest campaign at Tufts, previously we saw it at Pomona in the spring. What is this campaign? Just once again, it's a campaign. It's a new type of boycott. It's not BDS in the traditional way. It's now to cut funding to Jewish groups like Hillel and Chabad. It's an initiative that really, it's these groups that have nothing to do with the Arab-Israeli conflict. It's about targeting groups associated with Jewish identity. It's very worrisome. We saw it at Pomona, Tufts. We're seeing a few places, but it's still a new campaign. And because I'd say of pressure by trustees and within the administration, they are being defeated, but that role is very, very important. So if you look at Pomona, when SJP tried this for the first time at Pomona in the spring, it was due to the president's statement, a very strong and excellent statement that really got it defeated. And I would say that when a president is willing to show moral courage and moral strength and not equivocate, like what happened at Rutgers in the spring, where the president was all over the place in terms of condemning anti-Semitism, it makes a very big difference in terms of both showing leadership in defeating hatred on campus and making Jewish students feel supported and protected.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. At Tufts, there have been a number of incidents, but on the good news side, when Tufts SJP received an award for collaboration, the president did finally speak up against that. He was willing to participate in the Hillel International Campus Climate Initiative, which started this in its second year. And a month or two ago, he made a very strong statement about the work that they're doing as part of that program. And then when this campaign came out a few weeks ago, he also spoke about his disappointment in the campaign. He spoke very strongly about the work that they're going to be doing. So I definitely think trustees and others in the administration, they can do things like participate in the Campus Climate Initiative, adopt the IRA definition, and speak out strongly when there is an incident, and whether it's a swastika or something like at Tufts, and identify it as anti-Semitism. Whether it's something like, what my son went through when SJP tried to throw him out of student government, or more recently at UConn, where a senior was thrown out of her a cappella group for speaking out against anti-Semitic flyers on campus. She's still being harassed. And they can look into the funding of these groups on campus, what their activities are. They can speak out against and stand up to the student government if they're not adhering to the university's principles and policies, like Williams College did when they weren't going to allow Israel Club on campus. And they can investigate whether, or encourage the investigation of whether some of the students' campaigns or incidents that occur have violated campus codes of conduct. And most importantly, or a very important thing they can do, is to hold anti-Semitism training, whether for RAs, student government, faculty, freshmen, during orientation. After Duke recently had training for student government, they adopted the IRA definition. And also importantly, to combine efforts with DEI programs. So get those officers involved in understanding the distinction between Jew hatred and racism.
Thanks, Susan. I think also to your point, I know that University of Maryland has worked a lot with the administration on having different symposiums on anti-Semitism within these departments, which I think is incredibly important to have that representation. So absolutely, I couldn't agree more with that. Scott, maybe you can share. I know that you've had some experience in dealing with members of trustees and whatnot. What's your experience with them? Do you think they're willing to help kind of move the needle at all? Are they helpful? Are they able to help change with to change the environment of what's happening on campuses?
So that's an excellent and important question. And it's one of the reasons that I think people should maintain some involvement with the university, is to meet trustees and to find out how to be able to contact them. And it was because I had some relationships with trustees that I spoke to about 6 of them on the Northwestern Board of Trustees. And as I said, unfortunately, while they were all very sympathetic, the thing is that in the United States, we don't have knighthoods. So the closest thing you can get to being a knight is to be on the board of a university. And people crave that. And they don't really want to get off of it. And they don't think that they have any ability. They're under the misapprehension that they don't have the ability to make any change. So particularly the Jewish trustees really didn't want to make waves. They didn't want to, essentially make, the Jews should be quiet type of thing. That's a little bit sarcastic, but not hugely so. And so they just didn't want to say anything. In one case, one of the trustees stepped down in the following year because they didn't want to be associated with what was going on. But even then, didn't make any noise. And the non-Jewish trustees, to a greater degree, and as a matter of fact, a number have told me that they spoke to President Morty Shapiro. And the bottom line is the typical strategy of universities, and Northwestern was one, was to just sort of muddle through, not say anything, and wait years. They actually never responded to they said they were studying the BDS resolution literally for years after everyone who was involved with it graduated. They moved it from committee to committee. And so I think we have to be, unfortunately, a little bit more in the university's face and in the trustees' face. And I wish more trustees had said something, because maybe there would have at some point been a critical mass among the trustees to actually take action. But again, I just want to go back. This is why we have to make the claim and prove the claim, and the claim is correct, that this is not just about the Jews. It's about a fundamental corruption of academic standards. When you have these conspiracy theories, when you have departments that have gone from being places of teaching how to critically think to teaching kids how to think and what to think, and any deviation from that thought is reprimanded. I will tell you, at the University of Massachusetts, there was a student, I was on a panel, there was a student, and on one of the final exam questions, there was a question in which the correct answer was Israel's an apartheid state. So literally, if you didn't circle that answer, your grade was impacted. Again, a fundamental corruption, and yet just continues on.
Well, we're just about wrapped with time. I do want to say that there was a question that was started here for us. Now, is can ACF working with SSI or others set up a communication network between students on campus and alumni so that incidents and trends can be publicized? And I think that's a phenomenal idea. We work with many different pro-Israel campus organizations who work directly with students, including SSI, including Stand With Us, including ICC, and I can keep going on and on. But I think having something mechanized like that is a great idea, and thank you for that suggestion. We have just about a minute left. I'd love to maybe hear some last minute thoughts, maybe something, while this has been a very serious conversation, maybe something, what's an opportunity or positive takeaway we can learn from what's happening on campus today? It's a tough one, I know, but I always like to try to do something a little bit more on the positive side.
Well, I could say I'm just so glad that there are so many organizations like ACF and Stand With Us and AEN that are doing this work, creating awareness, supporting students and faculty, and using traditional media and social media to do that. At our first conference, we had Elon Carr speak, and now finally, maybe the prominence of Deborah Lipstadt as a special envoy will bring attention to these issues.
If I can just interrupt, we had Deborah on our virtual conference last year. She was our keynote speaker. So we've had back-to-back convoys. So we're happy with that. And
the last 3 administrations approved of the IRA definition. Even though the administration didn't support my son, they didn't want to interfere when SJP lodged its complaint against him for being pro-Zionist and student government. But he went forward with his story, and they backed down. But my son would still say he had a positive college experience and would still encourage Jewish students to attend Tufts. So just like Scott was saying, alumni still need to be involved. We don't want to diminish the Jewish population at these universities either. We need them. We need those students there.
I can just jump in to say that I do think real change is happening on campus, and it's entirely thanks to courageous students, alums, partner groups, all working together. And I know we're short on time, so I won't go into the full story, but I will say I think Duke this year is a perfect example of that, where students supporting Israel, the students wanted to create a public, official student group on campus. Student Senate President created a double standard for them and blocked them from forming in a totally illegal act. And the Student Senate backed her up. And so thanks to tremendous pressure by groups like ACF, alums, Stand With Us, sent a legal letter. We worked with students on the ground. Pretty much every Jewish and pro-Israel group out there stood behind students supporting Israel. The students on the ground supported them. They helped them. And after 4 months, they got recognition. And it's a tremendous success story of the power of the students on the ground, getting the support from the community around them, getting the results they need to combat anti-Semitism on campus. And so I guess the takeaway, I think, is it is possible to fight anti-Semitism on campus. And we're at our best and most successful when we all do it together. And so thank you, Avi, for bringing this opportunity for us all to come together today.
Thank you. Scott?
Yeah, I would just also end with the Purim story. You know, after Esther said that that you need approval to go and approach the king, Mordecai said his famous words, which were, you know, this is your moment, Esther. This is maybe why the whole world led to you being queen. And I think this is the test for our age. I think the notion that fundamentally Western society, if it falls into these conspiracy theories, if it falls into an end to critical thinking being taught in academia, it's not only going to be bad for the Jews. We may be the canary in the coal mine, and it's really bad for the canary, but it's also very bad for the coal miners. And we have to convince the coal miners that they're in danger too. And I think we can. I really, as I said, talking to the non-Jewish trustees, they in the end got it. And we just need to expand this conversation way beyond the Jewish community, way beyond talking to ourselves. And the people on this call are much better able to do that than students on campus. So for everybody listening, it's your time.
And I just want to add one thing, that after, my son bravely stood up to SJP on campus, they backed down. And then he was, not impeached. He was, in fact, reelected to the judiciary after their attempt. So
Fabulous. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time. We are over time as usual. That's what happens on these conferences. But thank you, Yael, Susan, Scott, for speaking and for joining us today. I'm going to pass the baton over to my colleague Joel so he can explain exactly how our breakout sessions will roll on. So thank you all, and Joel, take control.